portion of the forum. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, we have our mayoral candidates tonight. We're missing one, but we're fortunate to have these two gentlemen here to answer these questions. I'm going to go ahead and turn over to them to both do a brief introduction. We'll start with Mr. Flynn.
Hi, good evening. My name is Tim Flynn. I've been before this neighborhood council before. I want to thank Aaron and I want to thank the neighborhood council for the opportunity to present my candidacy and my bid for re-election. 2 years ago when I ran for mayor of the city of Oxnard, I promised to restore trust in Oxnard's government. And together with a council majority, we zeroed in on perhaps the most egregious abuse of taxpayers' money in the history of the city of Oxnard, and that was over the city's recycling trash facility. That facility, ladies and gentlemen, wasted close to $50 million since its inception in 1996. $25 million went to one person. One human being on a publicly owned facility. $25 million went to him in a contract, in a process that was marred by unethical and illegal behavior. The trash facility was taken over by the city 3 months ago, following a consultant's advice that it would take 6 years for the city to do it. We did it in 6 months, and now we are anticipating that in the first year of operations alone, we'll save $2.5 million. And I know what you're waiting for. Does that mean our trash bill will be lowered? I hope it will. But it will avoid trash bill increases. And I know that with wastewater and other funds that are not doing as well as trash, the city council needs to make some very tough decisions. Finally, we made a promise about streets. And arguably, a year ago, we could have acted on the streets. We've been paving streets, but we could have acted even faster. 3 months ago, I led the city council together with Councilman Perello, with Mayor Pro Tem Ramirez, myself, and Councilwoman Dorina Padilla. SFOR voted for a $30 million streets package that's going to pave every remaining residential street that has not yet been paved throughout the whole city of Oxnard. So, two large areas, two large commitments where substantial progress was made. I heard the council candidates, and I'm telling you that to say that that was arduous, to say that was difficult to get accomplished, given the environment, the DA investigation, and having interim directors and interim this, was just short of a miracle. But we have a new city manager, Greg Nyhoff. I was instrumental in his hiring. He's the best thing that's ever happened in the city of Oxnard. I wish I could say it was me. That's the best thing that ever happened to Oxnard, but it's Greg Nyhoff. You can elect, ladies and gentlemen, any group of people you like. If you don't have a decisive CEO at the helm of this large $352 million corporation, it's not going to get done. We have that man now. So I humbly ask for your vote, and I have to admit here, I'll admit that the candidate next to me is a friend of mine. What made him run against me is another story, but anyway, he's still my friend.
Must have been an old bet.
Yeah.
Thank you very much, Mr. Flynn.
Who's that person you're referring to? Can you use that name?
Lawrence
P. Stein.
Lawrence Paul Stein.
Lawrence Paul Stein.
Mr. Stein, can you give us a brief intro?
My name's Lawrence Paul Stein. I'm running for city council for mayor because I think we need a change. One of the issues I have is accountability. I'm an accountant by trade, an accountant by profession. I've been doing accounting work for 25 plus years. I've been focusing on city of Oxnard financial issues for 20 plus years. I've spoken before city council numerous times talking about financial issues, and my voice seems to be unheard. I've asked about headcount reports and budget analysis, and one of the areas where money is being hidden is the fact that we have budgets that are approved, staffing that's approved, but staffing doesn't take place. And that money is then transferred back to the department instead of back to the general fund reserves. We have several departments that are doing this, been doing this for years. So when you're looking for money for activities such as street repairs, one area to look at is through the budget, what's been appropriated, what's been approved to be spent, and that hasn't been spent. And that money should be reallocated. The case in point is the police department. The police department for years has historically not filled all its positions. So money used for those positions not being filled, still being budgeted, it's been appropriated but not expended. that money can be unappropriated and reallocated to use things like street repairs, to take care of our parks and other enhancements. So I've talked to city council about developer fees. We're seeing houses going up, but not enough developer fees being collected. We've asked for studies to take place on developer fees, and my voice is not being heard in the wilderness. So the reasons why I'm running is I want to make my voice heard. I think the public wants better accountability from staff. I like your vote so I can bring accountability back to the city and bring numbers back to a rate where it makes sense. It took 3 years from INCF to get the city council to vote on having bi-language simulcast on television. 3 years. And I want to commend the city council person who actually approved it. But this is the type of activity. City council is not holding staff accountable for decisions. City staff says, we're going to report you on this, we're going to report you on that, and the reports never come out, and the current city council does not hold staff accountable for reports they say they're going to deliver, but they never deliver. So I like your vote. I'd like to make a change for the city of Oxnard. I'd like to make a change that's better for everybody involved. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Stein. Okay, so we'll jump right into the first question. I think you guys are both primed up and ready for this one. It has to do with our streets again. Where would you find the money in an already fully committed budget for ongoing street maintenance and repair? Mr. Flynn.
Good, great question. So, as I stated, the city council 2 months ago approved a $30 million streets measure, of which $20 million is going to come from a bond. The bond, that $20 million, $2 million a year over 15 years, will be paid by Measure O proceeds, which is the sales tax increase that currently generates $12 million a year. So the other $10 million is going to come from surpluses in Measure O. So right now, Measure O is really the savior for streets. As far as arterials are concerned, that money comes from the federal government, and we get about 1 or 2 arterials funded each year by the Ventura County Transportation Commission. And Harbor Boulevard, I've been walking over in the Harbor Boulevard area. Harbor right now is one of the worst streets. It's like what 5th Street used to be, from Ventura Road to Plaza Park. We made sure we got that paved, Doris and Patterson. So you all remember Doris and Patterson, how bad they were. So city crews, and my wife, who's in the back, Julie, she said to me over and over again, you promised those people to get Doris paved. You can't show up before them until you get it paved. So I thank Julie for getting Doris paved more than anything else. But city crews now can grind down, of course, an inch on that road per state law without going out to bid, and we can put a 5-inch cover on top of that. So a total of 6 inches, a half foot. The fact of the matter is that every single road in this city that has not yet been paved, we need to come up with a program to get it paved faster than what the federal funding and the state funding is coming through. We do have one unfunded liability, a huge one, $40 million in alley repairs. We don't have the money, okay? We've already done $130 million of street paving, $130 million. The total price tag is about $250 million, $250 million over about a 15-year period. Streets were neglected, and it's easy to blame it on our predecessors, but the fact is they were neglected. Mrs. Barbering told me 52 years ago when she moved over here, they promised to get SCR3, the levy, SCR3 fixed. Still isn't fixed yet, and I do have responses about that, but that's on the streets.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Flynn. And Mr. Stein.
There are 2 sources of revenue that will be available for street repairs that have not been discussed by City Council. The first area is property tax. 7 years ago, the property tax revenues for the city was close to $60 million. The recession has reduced that down to $50 million, but in the next 2 years, this year and upcoming years, the property tax will be increasing back to the point of $60 million. So one source of funding will be increased revenues from property tax. A portion of that revenue is already allocated for raises for staff. A large portion that has not been discussed by City Council on where to use that money. Likewise, sales tax revenues are starting to increase. The primary source of sales tax are automobile sales. automobile sales coming up, revenues will be increased from sales tax revenue. So those are two sources of revenue. The third source is what I've alluded to in my earlier discussion, and that is how money is being funded from general funds that aren't being used and aren't being reappropriated back to the general fund. So when we see departments that, budget positions that don't get filled, that money is set aside in the budget to be allocated, it's never spent. Some of that money should be reallocated back. Part of it is being used for, should be used for street repairs, but not the only expenditure. Now, our city council voted early this year to use a portion of revenues from Del Norte. They claimed that the trucks traveling on the streets are causing excessive wear and tear, and that Del Norte should be paying for part of that. And that's partially correct. The same trucks are also driving on alleyways. And city council did not allocate any money from Del Norte, but trucks that are going on the alleyways causing wear and tear for alleyway repair. So again, this is an issue where city council does a job, but seems to only do half the job. They're addressing the streets, but again, as other members of the city council have addressed, alleyways not being repaired, funding is available for alleyway repair. City council doesn't seem to the will or desire to fix alleyways. They'll talk about it, but nothing ever happens. So there are sources of revenue for both street repair and alleyway repair, other than touching measurable money. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Stein. Now to our next question. Tree maintenance has long been neglected. How would you fund a resurrection of the city's tree trimming program? Mr. Flynn?
Well, as I walk door to door, I've had constituents ask me to get their trees trimmed, and I've had their trees trimmed. It's a very common thing. I heard what some of the council candidates had to say, and there's probably a little bit of truth in just about everything that somebody said. But the fact is that the city has several generations of trees that have caused tremendous capital improvement costs because they've upended sidewalks, they've gone into sewers, they've gone into drains. And so it's one of the consequences of having a greener and more beautiful city, which I'm an advocate of. I'm an advocate of more vegetation rather than less, but this is one of the consequences of that. So how we actually get the trees trimmed is another story. You heard about people, and I want to repeat myself, there are about 140 positions that Mr. Nyhoff has identified that are actually funded, but those positions have not been filled as a method of balancing the budget. That's not a good way to do that. We do need to balance the budget. We need to live within our own means. And I personally think some of the candidates were saying we don't have a revenue problem. Arnold Schwarzenegger once said, we do not have a revenue problem. We have a spending problem. And I think in the city of Oxnard, through performance-based and priority-based budgeting, we're going to be able to cut costs in every department. That includes the police department, reallocate those costs to not only road repair, but hiring more people to get these trees trimmed.
Thank you, Mr. Flynn. Mr. Stein?
The city council approves a balanced budget every year. So for our city council members to say that the budget is not balanced seems to be a disconnect. To answer your question, sometimes the city takes away too many trees. I had a very nice tree growing on the corner of my house. Been there when I bought the house. The tree was 15 plus feet tall. A truck got stuck in the tree. So instead of resolving the issue with the truck, they cut the tree down. And that made me less than happy, as you can imagine, because there was a tree I was taking care of. It was a nice evergreen tree. It was getting water from the soil. But the issue of what can the city do, what we used to have, we only have one arborist, one expert on trees. Why do we have a city of 200,000 people and miles of streets lined with trees and only one arborist? We had our former city manager said he was going to reduce staff but not impact services. Those services have been impacted. We see balanced budgets, but we see over-allocation of resources, as I've alluded to the third time now, where staff gets positions get budgeted, but those staff positions aren't filled and the money gets reallocated elsewhere. I think Ms. Nyhoff is looking at the headcount report. I asked for a headcount report. We finally got one in June. And the budget was approved with 230 additional positions than what the first head count was. And of the original head count report, there's 60 positions that were budgeted, appropriated funds for, but never expended. So to get back on track, I think Mr. Nyhoff is doing the right thing. He's looking at the budget, looking at head count reports, and allocating resources, and verifying allocation of resources with the monthly expenditure report. City Council has the opportunity of looking at a monthly expenditure report because it's posted online. Whether they do so or not is questionable, but this is a key source of revenue because it gives you actual numbers being spent against the budget and you can see where numbers are being shuffled around at the last minute. So there are opportunities to reallocate the budget, and I think staff needs to be held accountable to decisions that they make. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Stein. Next question has to do with our flood zone issue, and I'm sure at this point you're both very well aware of that. Should the residents living in the neighborhoods of Windsor North and South Bank who would be placed in the flood zone be responsible for funding any portion of the Santa Clara River Levy 3 work? If so, what percentage should those residents be responsible for, and if not, who should be responsible for paying that?
I think to answer that question.
Hold on,
because-
Mr. Stein, just for a second.
Oh, I thought you were gonna go back and forth.
Only two of you will.
Okay, all right, thank you.
We can do that on the next question.
Go ahead, Mr. Stein.
If you don't object, yeah.
Thank you very much. One of the issues.
They're not fighting, so I'm happy.
No, we're gonna have beers 2 weekends during Oktoberfest, so don't worry about that. In fact, you invited the Stein Beer Garden in honor of the Czech Festival in a couple of weeks. But to answer the question, we're not charging developer fees enough. The city approved a very large project at Wagon Wheel, over 2,500 homes, or 2,500 residential units will be going up there. But no fees were collected for the repairs of the levees. The River Park project that went up, another 3,500 homes for total build-out was planned, but nothing was being set aside for developer fees to help maintain and repair the levees. So the city has been negligent in charging developer fees, adequate funds to take care of infrastructure. What can we do down the line? Well, the first thing is start changing the developer fees. So for new houses going up at River Park or at Wagon Wheel, the developer fees should be increased to help cover the impact that the flooding will take place, because it's not going to affect just the neighborhoods that are currently existing, but future homes. So one aspect is start charging developer fees for the impacts that their community is going to have and help take care of infrastructure that has not been covered for in the past.
Okay.
So the
Mr.
question,
Stein.
the question, as I understand it, is should the Windsor North residents, however, be assessed, and if so, how much? Look, it's election time, so the political answer is absolutely not. They shouldn't be assessed, right? But the new city manager, Mr. Naya, is looking to. We have a unfunded. We have a gap, a funding gap, and Mr. Nyhoff is looking, I think, between $6 and $10 million to fund that gap without having to tax the Windsor North residents and the other residents here. Mr. Kapusik here, who's in the back room, worked tirelessly. He's presented before you before, happened to know him personally, and the county has come through, and the county's provided us an excellent entree to us then determining where we're going to get the funding gap, the remaining funds, to put up the best levy possible, and the one that would withstand a 100-year flood the most. So I think investing now into a better system is the right thing to do, and arguably, had that been done 52 years ago, had other infrastructure projects, had people had the vision and the foresight 40, 30, 50 years ago to make these investments, then people like us wouldn't be saddled with such what appears to be at times a very unfair and unreasonable burden.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Flynn. And our next question, somewhat related, what's the best use of the Kasdan property? You both know the name I'm referring to, the parcel that is. We'll start again with Mr. Flynn.
I know one thing, I know that Oxnard, to have another standard run-of-the-mill housing project, especially a dense housing project, is not something that is extraordinary and special. I mean, somebody could say, you know, if we went without developing that corner with homes, you know, would people just lose sleep over it? No, they wouldn't. But my predecessors that I served with on the city council, by a 4-to-1 vote, I was the lone dissenter, voted to give the former Kasdan developers a 15-year development agreement. Ridiculous, 15 years. I felt at the time the Cowboys had left Oxnard, the Cowboys were going to be in Houston, and I felt, and it wasn't the only reason I turned down the development, I thought the 15-year term was unreasonable, I thought the density was unreasonable, I thought the unanswered questions about SCR3 had needed to be answered before we would go forward with the development, and I believed that the Cowboys would want to come back. They love this area. So I heard some of the comments, what were said about the Cowboys. Look, I guess the organization's worth $3 billion right now. $3 billion. Mr. Jones is worth $3 billion if he sold that company right now. That's miraculous, by the way, to take a sporting organization and build it up to $3 billion. I would like to see that corner utilized for not just a cowboy camp. I'd like to see it as a multi-purpose sporting facility that would not attract 10 and 20 and 30,000 people, but would be something compatible with the neighborhood, that would offer venues for soccer teams and for other organizations. However, I would not consent to it unless the neighborhoods bought into it. And there's always going to be dissenters. There's always going to be people say, it doesn't matter what you want to put there. I heard Mayor Pro Tem Ramirez raise it, who wants this, who wants that, who wants this? And so I think it would take a lot of work with the neighborhoods before we would ever get to the point where the corner would be developed for a multi-sports complex. I'll end the conversation, or end my part by saying, I cannot say what I've learned in closed session, but I would say if you picked up that land and it was in receivership, and the land, I'm just going to throw a value out there, it's $5 million, it's $10 million, whatever it is, what are you going to do if you pick that up and you pick it up cheap, right? And you know that the Cowboys, which are, you know, a national team, and you read the papers and you have the intelligence, so now people want it. The Cowboys want it, the hotel wants it, the city wants it, Cowboy fans, Raider fans, whoever wants it, right? Well, obviously that demand is going to jack up the price, and it's going to be very difficult, I think, with the city's limited resources to somehow come up with the amount of money it would take to buy the whole corner. Now, I heard someone say very quickly about, I'd like to see a park there. Well, we have the sports park on the corner of Oxnard Boulevard and Gonzales Road. It still hasn't been developed. We have Campus Park. That hasn't been developed. We have about $65 million right now in park needs. We have in the next 10 years, $500 million in public works projects that need to be done in the next 10 years. $500 million, and right now the city's debt is $450 million, of which $50 million is the general fund. So in 10 to 15 years, we could have $1 billion of debt, because that's how much infrastructure has been neglected. So we got to make wise decisions. I heard a lot of things that the other candidates said, and you know, you just can't be throwing money around and let the lure of a professional sports team make you make poor decisions. So I'd like to see a sports complex there, but there has to be buy-in from the neighborhoods.
Thank you, Mr. Flynn. Mr. Stein.
Mr. Flynn makes a very good point that we need to have input from the neighborhoods to see what they want. That's first and foremost. Right now, plow the land down, plant grass. Because grass will look a lot nicer than just plain dirt. And people can walk on grass, they can play on grass, they can run their dogs on grass, they can fly a kite on grass. Mr. Henderson has invited me numerous times to go out and fly a kite. And I will take him up on one of these days to actually go out and fly a kite. But that's the whole idea, is open space. We don't need to have organized sports. I have enough we see too many soccer fields out there. What's wrong with just having plain grass where people walk on the grass and have picnics? It doesn't have to be organized. Back in the day when I was knee-high to grasshopper, kids would just go out, find an empty dirt lot and play. You know, baseball, soccer, whatever the case may be. At least plow this down, plant grass, and use breakwater, once you get the breakwater piped up there, and use it, and do something. Sports park, it's an empty lot, 25 plus acres, empty lot. Why can't you at least water it down, plant grass on it? Make it look attractive at least. I mean, a plain dirt lot is not conducive to our homes, it's not conducive to property values. So start with the basics, ask what the neighborhoods want, meanwhile, plow it down, plant grass on it, make it viable. The Casden property, I believe, is city-owned. And the city got it back because of the real estate deal that was approved by city council. Nobody that I'm aware of involved in real estate would ever sign a real estate deal where the buyer has the option to sell back his property 2 years later. You know, and that doesn't make sense. How is it that we have a legal staff that allows the contract takes place? Staff needs to be held accountable. We received $20 million, we spent the $20 million, it should not have been spent, now we've got to pay back the $20 million, and we own the land. So are we going to sell the land back? And who's going to buy the land that's in the flood zone? Who's going to buy the land that's got a dike that might flood and cause flooding? Who's going to pay for that? Who's going to want that? The market value isn't there for the best efforts of the citizens right now, so I think the best use of that land, like they do at golf courses in the back east, and just plant grass on it, and if it floods, and no damage is done to permanent structures. So ask neighborhoods and see if we just want to plant grass on it and keep it as an open area.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Stein. And our next question, kind of along the same facility, what is your solution to the River Ridge Golf Course's inability to be financially self-sustaining? Mr. Flynn.
Well, first and foremost, I heard one of the candidates say, he spoke about competition, right? If there's not competition in capitalism, it's a monopoly. This golf course contract is a monopoly because other than the first time it was awarded, well over 20 years ago, it has never been competitively bid. That therein is the problem. End of discussion. And the city does not know, I do not know, no one in this audience knows exactly what the golf course contract is worth. I've suggested, we have 4.5 years left on that contract, that we go out to bid now, at least see what our position is. If we're going to save or can save by a new contract $750,000 over a 3 or 5 year period, or I say 750, it doesn't matter what the figure is, and we can buy out the current operator of the golf course, or get him to match those bids, or buy him out for a certain amount of money and still save money, then I think we should do that. I think that this golf course is one of the best golf courses in Ventura County. It should exceed the revenues of Buenaventura's golf course. Buenaventura's golf course, which I looked into extensively comparing the two, has 40% more rounds of golf than our golf course, and we have a superior golf course. Even Ventura, even the CFO of Ventura admitted to me, we envy you with your golf course in Oxnard. So I do know that because of the rancor on the city council about the lack of profitability of the golf course, that the current operator, that they're putting more money into marketing, and they're trying to find innovative ways to do it. I remember when this room used to be a bar, and people used to come here all the time. I think there are a lot of ways that this place you could spin off some of these operations, start making them individual profit centers, and you could make a lot more money. But I do want to say about golf, right? The fact is that there are 1 million people a year in the United States of America, less each year, that are playing golf. And so it makes it more and more competitive, more and more difficult to be financially successful. But I'll go right back to the fact that if any contract, any private contract is not competitively bid, then the taxpayers are not being served well.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Flynn. Mr. Stein.
I'd like to remind the public that the city council approved the 10-year contract. It was not unapproved by city staff alone. The city council had to approve that 10-year contract, so city council should bear some of the blame on having a 10-year contract. It wasn't a 3-year contract with 3-year extensions. It's a 10-year contract. So again, city staff is driving the horse, is driving the cart here. and city council isn't holding staff accountable. So what do you do with the golf course? Well, how do you make it profitable? Now, I've been studying the golf course as one of the things for over 20 years. The golf course was expanded to sell homes. We went from 18 holes to 36 homes to sell more homes to make it attractive to home buyers. People who live on a golf course pay more for the home than somebody who doesn't. They have the attractiveness of that, and they feel that market values are improved. If the golf course isn't making money, how is that going to affect things? It may go under. I've been in numerous communities where a golf course was built, the golf course was not successful, so it didn't get watered, so you have 300 acres of dry land surrounded by homes that used to be more marketable. The golf course can be profitable, and the question has to be asked, as the mayor has alluded to, why is one golf course attracting more clients than the other? The golf course is a cash operation. I'm concerned that perhaps not everything is being reported. And not only that, but the golf course only pays a portion of the fees to the city and keeps other portions. For example, rounds of golf are split between the city and the golf course operator. Other activities such as the pro shop, the restaurant, and the driving range revenues aren't going back to the city. So again, the contract we're stuck with. We have poor legal advice from city staff, and that does not fix the situation. The golf course, I think, should be maintained, but the status of enterprise fund should go away. I think after the contract expires, a public golf course is still a public golf course. The players who play golf have never fully paid for the full cost of the golf course, nor do public golf courses necessarily make money. So, as with other activities, take away the status of enterprise fund, pay city employees to greens, allow people to have higher wages. The wages people who work at the golf course aren't binding by labor law for the city. So they can be paid minimum wage, where the city has a living ordinance where the employees will be paid several dollars more per hour. So again, if we take away the status of enterprise fund and let the contract expire in its due course and have the city take over the operation, but not as an enterprise fund, but as another entity as part of Parks and Recreation. And we're paying for the subsidy. Part of the debt will be going away on the golf course in 2 years, I believe. So the cash flow should improve just by doing nothing, but by improving the marketing and spending money on marketing, perhaps we can attract more people. Bear in mind, it's a golf course that brings tourists to Oxnard. And the fact that we may have a better golf course, we have a well-run hotel that attracts people, people will come to a golf course and spend money if the golf course is appealing. So I think it would behoove the city to maintain the golf course and let the enterprise status go away in 2 years or after the end of the contract.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Stein. And our last questions, as you probably heard earlier, we combined the two topics that are essentially the same. Considering our diverse population in the city of Oxnard, what does sustainable residential development mean to you? Mr. Flynn.
Well, I would say that sustainable development is development that, since we have a scarcity of land, there are 2 parcels left in the city that can be developed, South Shore and Teal Club. Those are the only 2 parcels left in the city, and then there's a commercial parcel off the freeway off of Del Norte. So there are only 3 parcels left. So sustainable development is not something we really have an option to do or not. We have to develop in a sustainable way because open land is no longer available. So sustainable development to me is infill development, where there's a lot of land in the city that is vastly underutilized, and there's a lot of blight in the city that needs to be removed, and in its place could and should come a sustainable level of development that's going to keep up with job growth in the city. I do think, as much as I'm an advocate of the market determining how many homes and that type of thing, Mr. Stein has raised an issue about developer fees and that kind of thing. The city of Oxnard over the last 20 to 30 years has arguably had, and this is what one of our senior planners has said, a laissez-faire attitude about developers and developer fees. And I would throw one more thing in there, and you know, that contributions to candidates drive a lot of things in elections. And so, on the other hand, I think we have to have some kind of bell curve where, you know, there's a point where you can tax people and or place too many fees on a development, and it's not going to bring the needed development or the affordable housing and all these other things. And then there's a case where you can move it in a direction where you're getting more of what there is to get for traffic impact fees and all the other developer fees, and still keep people who are maintaining an interest. In the next 20 to 30 years, all coastal cities in the state of California are going to become wealthier, and they're going to become older, and there's going to be a demand for more and more housing, and I think the only way to go is through sustainable growth and sustainable housing.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Flynn. Mr. Stein.
Sustainable growth, by definition, means that growth that can pay for the costs against the revenues generated by that growth. They're both fixed costs and variable costs. The fixed costs include capital improvement projects. The variable costs include services provided attending to those properties. A case in point, if you're going to build 2,500 homes, you're going to need to build a high school, a middle school, and 2 or 3 elementary schools. And those are the costs that are going to take place. You're also going to need to build parkland. And currently the city's spending between $300,000 to $400,000 to develop an acre of parkland. So fees need to be collected to take care of the initial capital costs. And the fees aren't being collected. Right now, a developer who builds homes pays a small portion for schools. We taxpayers pay for the balance of that schools through bond issues. I live in South Oxnard. I have at least 3 elementary bond issues I'm paying on. I have at least 2 high school bond issues I'm paying on. I'm paying on a college district bond issue because fees haven't been collected. So what do? First thing, as alluded to, is do analysis of developer fees and what is the cost and assess a fair value. One suggestion I have is to stop building 4-bedroom homes. Start building 1-bedroom and 2-bedroom homes. That would reduce the impact on schools. The second issue is look at what it costs to develop parkland and assess fees appropriately. Water. Now, we're in a drought, and we're going to encourage more housing. We don't have enough water for our current housing. These are issues that have been addressed by yours truly numerous times and fallen by the wayside by City Council. So one of the reasons why I'm running is bring these issues to the forefront, have these issues raised in public forums, and have staff make honest decisions and give us honest information. When we get an EIR that says we're going to build 700 homes and that's not going to impact traffic, I say boulder dash. When we build 3 projects, one next to each other, each having 700 homes, and the impact to traffic is negligible, I say boulder dash. Staff isn't being held accountable for decisions they make in public when reality says otherwise. We have a project that was approved or annexed into the city not too long ago by city council members. That was East Village Annexation Phase 3. That was a donut hole in the middle of West Village. The owners of that land developed over 2,000 acres of land, now known as East Village, West Village, and all the property along Del Norte and Sturgis Road. That was owned by and controlled by one large family. Then they complained that because all this development took place around them, they all had this donut hole that they developed themselves and wanted this land annexed in. 200 acres, then they wanted to develop this, but the development has not been approved. So what are we going to do? Are we going to hold the developer now accountable for the donut hole and what kind of houses is going to take place? So we need to have, before any more development takes place, we need to have analysis done to find out what the fiscal impact is on the city and not just schools. Because the city cannot control fees for schools. It's set by state law. But the city can ask for school enhancement fees for those fees being collected by the city go back to school districts. So there are things the city can do legally to help improve the infrastructure, stop burdening taxpayers with infrastructure's costs that are caused by development but not paid for by developers. So sustainable growth means to have developments going in that pay for itself, both in fixed costs with capital improvement and variable costs because property tax and sales tax with development increases revenue. Because of development, we have Walmart, we have shopping malls, we have all this commercial property now taking place in Oxnard. People have a chance to buy things. When I came to Oxnard 25 plus years ago, I tried to buy a suit at J.C. Penney's in downtown Oxnard, and I couldn't buy a suit because they didn't sell suits. I had to go across the river to the J.C. Penney store to buy a suit. So if we want to make things attractive to our residents and improve sales dollars and sales tax revenues, we need to have businesses that people want to shop at. We can't force a business to sell a certain product. We have to make them want to sell certain products. The collections are being successful now because of the way it's marketed. But because of the way it's being marketed, all the business in downtown Oxnard is falling by the wayside. We built the 101 freeway to go from PCH up to Rice to the 101 freeway. That took how much traffic away from downtown Oxnard? How much traffic was diverted from downtown Oxnard to away from downtown Oxnard? So when businesses complain we have no business, it's because City Council has taken action to divert business away from other small businesses. So we need to do things to refix the wheel, and that's part of sustainability.
I think you covered it there. Well, that concludes the forum.
And I'm here to say that I hope that Mr. Stein will join my campaign if I attend his Czech beer garden this year.
Well, I'll wait for your $5,000 contribution before I do that.
You heard it, Mayor.
Yes.
Can the floor ask some questions of the candidates?
Sure, if you have no objections, time-wise, do you want to take questions from the
I'm
audience?
past my bedtime, so, you know, what the heck.
Yeah. You have school tomorrow, so.
I do have school.
I have a two-part question on our lovely golf course.
Yes, ma'am.
One, why is it not PGA certified or at any point been PGA certified for PGA tournaments or events? And two, during its development, why was there never a Hope 6 grant to clean out our lovely landfill that smells wonderful when it rains?
I don't know why it's not a PGA certified golf course. I don't know what the criteria is for that. I do know that the golf course is a tremendous asset for the city. That, you know, there's been a lot of talk about it on the city council, but it's for a good reason. And I want to just make a quick reference to what one of the council candidates for council had mentioned, that, you know, golf courses are somewhat like parks and they can't always turn a profit and things like that. But a golf course is driven by the fees that people pay, right? It's driven by the fees. And the fees that are collected the revenue should equal the expenditures. That's the bottom line. And one of the myths, and one of the, which is, it really is misinformation, is that the only reason that people are really upset about the golf course is about capital improvements, having to pay bonds on capital improvements. And that's not true. What's true is that in 2012, the golf course had a net loss of $712,000. Now again, I understand golf courses having problems all over, but we can't just blame it on what's happening all over. We have to focus on how we make this golf course better. As far as the landfill, and that's another thing that people will say, look, we took a landfill and put a golf course on top of it. That's pretty innovative, and that was a good idea. But as far as why they didn't clean this out or clean that out, I don't know. I do know that when I'm asked about this corner, that the city has a lot that we already sold, about 15 acres, that was a former toxic dump site. That lot, perhaps if it were sold to our water department, because the water department for wells might need it, that might also provide some needed revenue for, you know, the corner. And one of the things I didn't say about this corner is, ladies and gentlemen, this corner is not just an average corner, not only because you live here, but it's close to the freeway, it's right next to a beautiful hotel and a golf course. And the synergy of all of those elements together really produces the thought, look, we could do better with this corner than just a standard run-of-the-mill development.
Excuse me, but that's
Okay, Mr. Stein, did you want to answer her question too, or do you have anything to add?
I have less to add than what was spoken. I know very little about golf. I know that Mr. Henderson is getting a large percent of his salary dealing with the golf course. So why city staff has not addressed the issue, why it isn't PGA certified, why that question hasn't been asked by city council in the past, or why the public hasn't asked that question during public meetings. Again, and did you get an answer?
No, and you didn't answer me either,
Okay,
Mr. Stein.
okay, the answer to the question is, I don't know why it's not certified. And it's, I would suggest you ask in public again with the new city manager, for you to get a response from Mr. Henderson, why it's not PGA certified, because I don't have the answer for that.
You didn't either.
Okay. Gentlemen, you both talked about development here in the city of Oxnard. You talked about single-family home and commercial development. Mr. Stein, you talked about 2,500 homes being developed at Wagon Wheel and the impact to schools. There's other types of developments that can be developed, senior living and all that, that would have zero impact to schools, because people in their 60s typically don't have kids. It would increase tax revenues to the city without expenses to the city. What would you as mayor do to encourage that type of development in the
Again,
city?
as I tried to allude to, or thought I alluded to, is the fact that we start building two-bedroom homes, then the fees would be less impact on schools and might create a demand, as you alluded to, not just for seniors, but for starter families. A two-bedroom home would be ideal for either a single person or a family who's just getting started, because one bedroom could be used for their personal use, a second bedroom could be used as a guest room or a study, and additional space could be set aside for a nursery. So I think we start focusing on building one-bedroom and two-bedroom units as either single-family homes or as attached townhomes to help address the issue of this particular need.
And Mr. Stein, I need to take you for a ride in Oxnard and show you the number of two-bedroom homes that 5 people, 6 people, and multiple families are
Nobody
living
come
in,
this way.
so that you wake up,
You don't have to do that. I sell apartment on Saturdays,
okay?
and I measure apartments.
I would rather see
And I
a
can
4,000 square foot home that is sold to someone who's 55 years old and his kids are in college, that brings in $20,000 a year as a tax base on a 20,000 square foot lot, that there is all income to the city and there's no expense out.
You take that 4-bedroom home, and you're gonna see, instead of 10 people living in that home, you're gonna see 40 people living in that home. There are homes in Oxnard that have 10 beds in a room, bunk
Not-
beds.
Not when those purchase prices are between $1 million and $2 million.
That's a different issue. You go-
I like to just take
Mr.
on.
Flynn, do you have
Yeah.
to?
Yeah, no, well, first of all, let's take senior housing, right?
Mhm.
One of the largest senior housing complexes anywhere in Ventura County is down the street from where I live, right? That is a low-income, senior housing complex. Arguably, it's needed. Our neighborhood, the Wilson neighborhood, was promised, however, that we'd have market rate, and then there would be various levels of affordability. That promise was violated. That was before I was on the council. And then once I got on the council, I had a conflict of interest because I lived within 500 feet of the property. So I couldn't vote on it, right? So we need market rate housing. We need more affordable housing for seniors.
I'm thinking Leisure Village.
Okay,
type
I
home.
understand, but let me say, and Wainimi Village is a great, Wainimi, what's it called, Wainimi Bay.
Wainimi Bay.
Okay, so here's the thing though. Sycamore Senior Center, there's a fire engine that goes down there about 3 or 4 times a day.
Mhm.
It's unbelievable, and arguably there should be a nurse there on the premises, and maybe things like that, we should require it. But as far as, don't get me started on overcrowding, you and I have had that issue.
Yes.
I've tried to bring the council to a point where we can begin to do that. In my second term, if I'm lucky enough to be reelected, I want to take on the problem of overcrowding in the city. It has a severe impact on finances of the city, has a severe impact on schools and infrastructure, and has a severe impact not only on health and safety, but on quality of life.
Mhm.
So, but getting back to the single-family thing, we need downtown Oxnard, you talked about sustainable growth, We need more single person or lofts and one-bedroom places where individuals can then walk over to the transportation center, transit-oriented development, and that would do a lot on the traffic situation, plus provide higher disposable incomes. Every community needs a balance, right? Every community. People talk about low-income housing, they talk about all these things. Fine, we just need a balance. And because as one of the council candidates, he was talking about, I think we should build really expensive homes, then there'll be more revenue for, affordable housing. We need a balance. And there are many things in this city that are out of balance. The overcrowding is out of balance. The need for more infrastructure is out of balance. And we need to bring that gradually into balance. And I will say that I've been at the forefront of that. My distinguished colleague, Councilman Perello, has been at the forefront of that. And this new city manager is on it. I mean, he is on it. This guy is tip-top. And anyway, that's all I'll say about that.
Another question for
Yes,
the
sir.
two of you.
Oh, okay, just a second. Okay, I'll let, go ahead.
Okay.
Go first.
In the past few years, this city has been placed in a lot of liability issues because of the actions of city employees,
Okay?
mainly the police department.
Okay?
Incidents of shootings, incidents of running people over on the beach. What would you do as mayor, city council, in requiring city employees to carry liability, their own personal liability insurance for actions, their personal actions, while an employee? Lawyers are required to carry liability insurance, real estate agents are required, accountants, doctors, nurses. There's no reason why city employees should not carry liability insurance for their actions.
I'll
Us
just-
taxpayers should not.
Right. So let me say about your idea. It's a fascinating idea, and I'm not saying that just to pay lip service to it. It's a fascinating idea. I don't know under California state law if general cities, we're a general city, not a charter city.
Right.
I don't know if employees in a general law city governed by the state of California can be compelled to do that, even in some kind of negotiated agreement, but I can certainly look into it. Okay? So I think that's good. What one has to remember, and you made some statements about liability in certain, it's much more prevalent in certain professions and sectors of the city,
Right.
is that we belong to an insurance pool. Of course, we pool in with other cities for economy of scale, and we're liable for the first $1 million of it, but that's still a lot of money, all right, a tremendous amount of money. We need to make smarter decisions in terms of human resources and how we train people to avoid those situations from happening to begin with. We have a lot of public works lawsuits. Most of our lawsuits are over public works projects. So quality control with contracts, a legal staff person, an assistant city attorney who specializes in public works projects. We're going to bring that. That's our request now, to bring a person like that on to minimize that. And I've said to the current acting city attorney, we need to find, as a performance-based measure, over 5 years, how are we reducing our lawsuits and the liabilities, and what policies can be put in place to minimize the lawsuits.
Mr. Stein?
To answer your question, employees of a corporation aren't responsible for paying, employees of a corporation aren't personally liable for the actions they take unless it's egregious and determined to be outside the scope of the normal job performance. So when we had 2 police officers patrolling the beach, they inadvertently ran over somebody, they're doing the performance of their duties. They were not negligent, it was an accident. So to have the issue of having personal liability insurance, having employees responsible for personal liability for their actions is beyond the scope of normal activity between employee and employer relationship. As an individual professional, you have to carry liability insurance to protect yourself. But as an employee of a professional organization, you're not personally liable, the corporation is liable for the actions of the employees. And that's the theory of law here. So it would not prove itself out to have employees being liable for their actions. It's the entity that employs them that's liable for their actions, which is
That's
why
not
we
100
have,
It's not 100% true.
but that's the theory.
That's the theory, it's not
That's the
100%
theory.
true.
Okay, that's the theory.
In a perfect world, that's.
Yeah. Okay.
I work in law enforcement and I carry personal liability insurance, not for what happens on duty, but off duty. If I use a weapon somewhere, my employer's not gonna cover me. That's my discretion, I choose that. A lot of other officers do the same thing, but when you're on duty, you're covered by the Peace Officers Bill of Rights, and there's a lot of other legal
There are other things,
issues
for
with that.
example, you have the Good Samaritan laws in effect as a police officer, so if I had skills to take care of somebody as an accident, the person dies of my care and skills, anybody can be sued for anything.
Right.
This is why lawyers do so well sometimes.
If they can prove gross negligence and that you acted outside of your scope, then you're on your own, no
Yeah.
matter who you're employed by, basically.
city
You had a question, and then I'll jump back here.
Yeah, just real quick, so one of the biggest issues facing any city in Southern California right now is the drought. And, we can't afford to make a wrong decision here, we run out, we run out. I've heard talk about the desalinization plants that don't work, I've heard talk about facilities that don't have piping to them, so what can the city do? And we all got notices now that mandatory rationing, what can we do to improve the situation?
Well, and Mr. Stein and I discuss this quite often.
You consider me an expert in the area?
I would consider you to be
The grand jury
invaluable
The
to the
grand
city.
jury considers me an expert on the area.
Okay. I would say this, that you talked about desal plants and a lot of other things that aren't working, everything else. The GREAT program, Groundwater Enhancement and Treatment Facility, okay,
Advanced treatment.
was a visionary thing that former Public Works Director Ken Ortega came up with that will provide dividends to the people of Oxnard for decades, if not centuries. It was brilliant. The selling of that water, however, and the strategy after it was built, I would argue, was not thought out to the extent that it could have been. And I would compare the building of that facility to America's victory in the Persian Gulf Wars, but the aftermath of it just being permitted actually 3 months ago to the occupation of Iraq. That's why we've had a tremendous problem. And the reason why is because the state of California still, even though the water that will be produced by this facility will be purer than the water that comes out of any tap in the United States of America, the state of California to this day still does not consider that water potable. So it has to be injected into an underground well right now for up to 6 months before it can then be drawn out. Right now, the city is close to getting an agreement with farmers. The model of this plan, which I feel was, this is where we could have done a lot better, is that the model of this plan was that we'll provide water to farmers and we'll get credits from them so we can pump cheaper groundwater and not import more expensive water from the state. The problem is that credit system, and this is where my distinguished friend Mr. Stein and I have a lot of agreement, that credit system is like monopoly money. It's a phony bank.
I'm glad you used the term monopoly.
And we have 50,000 acre feet right now of outstanding credits. 50,000 acre feet. An acre foot is the equivalent of an inch of water, 328,000 gallons, an inch of water covering a football field. We have 50,000 football fields of an inch of water in credits right now that because of conservation measures by the Groundwater Management Agency, we're not allowed to draw to the extent that we need to. So the problem is, when I came in, I said, look, we have to recover operating expenses for this facility. It's extremely expensive to operate this facility, especially at the stage of where it is right now. So, and if we're going to get a bunch of phony credits that maybe a system's going to just collapse at some future point, then we've really not done our jobs and we've not served the taxpayers properly. So right now we're in a very crucial stage of getting an agreement with several farmers and farming entities that will begin that water, to start pumping that water. I've asked Public Works in a meeting a week ago to get that water and start that water, getting it pumped to the golf course at least, so we can begin producing that water and showing people that this $70 million investment and $100 million and $100 million or $150 million to go was not worthwhile, but it is visionary. Now, last thing I want to say about the GREAT program. Other communities, once again, envy what we've done. They know now, because of the situation we're in, that Oxnard made a good move. We're having some difficulties getting the deal closed, but we're going to get that deal closed, start pumping that water. The benefits are going to be then coming to us. It is, I believe it's just a matter of time before the state of California says the 6 months pumping it into the underground aquifer, mix it into the mixing stations with groundwater. Hopefully we won't have to import state water, and we'll start drinking that recycled water. And I know it's not very palatable to some people to think about it, but I'll drink that first glass. That first glass of water coming out of that tapper, I will drink that down. And I honestly, I will.
I'll join you.
Okay, good.
Thank you.
Mr. Stein, did you have anything else to add?
Oh, I have a
before we
lot to
start?
add to that.
It's not a city council meeting, Larry, so you've got, you know, let's.
I have time. First of all, it wasn't, the concept of tertiary treatment wastewater took place in the early 90s with Ben Wong. And when I first ran for city council in 92, and again in 93 and 94, one of the things I talked about was tertiary treatment of wastewater. So I've been involved in this concept and project, or well, not necessarily hands-on, but following this issue for 20 plus years. The issue of selling the water to farmers will not be economically viable. The biggest player in town is MWD. And MWD is a consortium of numerous water entities, including Cayugas. The solution to the great water, pun intended, is the fact that we need to sell at a certain capacity. The current capacity of the great program is 1 skid for 7,000 acre-feet of water. To make the item profitable, we need to be producing 3 skids or 21,000 acre-feet of water. 21,000 acre-feet of water is enough water for 42,000 homes. We don't need that water because we're producing enough water locally, so this excess water is not viable to the community because we have sufficient water being generated internally. But this water needs to be sold at market rates to make it economically viable. MWD's water is being shut off and being reduced from Northern California. This water can be piped back up to Cayugas, up to Moore Park, and stored in Moore Park, or transfers back to Los Angeles. So the solution to this isn't necessarily on the taxpayers of Oxnard, but this is a community issue. This is to be subsidized not just by Oxnard residents, but by the county and the water district at large. Right now, it costs the city $800 to $900 to produce an acre foot of water. I use maybe 10 HCFs of water per month. That translates, and I'm being charged almost $2,000 per acre foot. So I'm being charged $2,000 per acre foot for water that costs $800 per acre foot. Where's the money, where's the difference going? The difference is going to pay for the bond issues for the GREAT program for water we're not getting. That's in violation of the law. That's in violation of Prop 218. But to answer your question, is the water needs to be produced, we need to scale up to either 3 skids or 4 skids of water. 4 skids is the maximum capacity, and be able to sell that water. And that's the sticking point. When it's first conceived, the thought that we'd be able to sell this water to local commercial users and they can use this commercially. The problem is that isn't that much demand for commercial use of this water. The biggest user of commercial water is the Procter & Gamble. And they're only going to be using 1,000 acre-feet of water, more or less. The staff report and public documents show that the top 5 users of commercial water is less than 2,000 acre-feet total. So what the heck are we doing generating 21,000 acre-feet of water designed for commercial use when we can't use it for commercial use because there's no demand for it? The answer is to make it potable, make it used so it can be used for potable purposes, and sell it to who wants to buy it. Cayugas does not want to buy it, they don't need the water either, but MWD needs the water. And if we can sell it to MWD at market rates, everybody wins. We'll see the money that we're paying as residents or users should go down, at least not go up. And the money generated from that will help pay for the debt service on bonds we've been paying for since 2006. There are 4 water bond issues we're paying on right now that have to do with the GRADE program. So I think the GRADE program is a wonderful idea. I think it's will be successful, has potential of being successful, and not benefit just the city of Oxnard, but Southern California, generally speaking.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Stein. We have one more question in the back, Mr. Kapusik.
I wonder if you will allow a good Chicago boy who grew up in South Oxnard and now lives in Ventura the last question. So Einstein talked about something in German called the Gedanken experiment, the thought experiment. If you think about it, everything that we do has to occur in our minds first. In New State Ice Company versus Liebman, Justice Brandeis says states are the laboratories of democracy. In the LA Times today, it said if that's true, cities are the guinea pigs. So my question to the two of you is if you could walk into the laboratory of democracy and decide on an experiment, one experiment only, to improve governance in the city of Oxnard and improve the lives of the citizens, what would that experiment be and why?
I would just answer, I would say exploring a charter city. The people of the city of Oxnard would write their own charter. Today we're a general law city. That we would write our own charter, and that charter would be, we model it after other cities throughout this country and in this state that have used charter cities to think outside the box, to be dynamic, to, whether it's guns and hoses, which was an idea 25, 30 years ago about firemen that are off duty that also act as policemen. I'm not saying that's exactly what it is. I'm just talking about using the conveyance or the method of a charter city to take Oxnard in a direction that gets us out of so many of these hand-tying, frustrating, and experimental laboratory type situations. And whether it's the issue of group homes and neighborhoods, to this overcrowding issue, I just can't tell you how many things that have come across in my thought process where I think a charter city would do a lot of good. The other thing about charter cities is that we could get a lot more revenue from franchise agreements, which many of those cities throughout, and there are several cities in Ventura County that are charter cities, Ventura is one of them, where they get a lot more revenue from franchise agreements, which is all the underground utilities as a result of being charter cities. So in the past in the city of Oxnard, many citizens groups have been against charter cities because they thought they'd be used in the wrong ways. And they could be used in the wrong ways, but what people should understand is that it's the citizens that write this charter, that we can control and determine our own destiny by writing this charter. Not allow outside interests to do it, that we the people can write our own charter. So that would be my answer to your question.
Mr. Stein, have anything to add to that?
I don't have the same educational level as my friend
Mr. Stein, you're well advanced.
I only have a bachelor's degree and you have a master's.
I do, Mr. Stein, but you have a philosophy and a PhD in economics.
Well, I don't have a PhD in economics. I just have my bachelor's degree. To answer your question, it's less esoteric. I like to hire some social workers. 10, 15, 20, 25 social workers. Because what's taking place in the city isn't working right now. We have a large amount of domestic violence. We have a large amount of drug abuse. We have a large amount of homeless issues. And these aren't simple issues. We have our police departments overwhelmed with just going to domestic violence calls. And that's the most dangerous call a police officer can go on unless I'm wrong. But when a police officer goes into a domestic violence situation, they don't know what they're walking into. They do not know the personalities involved. They don't know who's holding what and what actions they have. But having social workers involved and start taking the caseloads away from the criminal justice system and start fixing the problems and addressing the problems on social issues. I mean, homelessness, we have different categories of homeless. We have people who've lost their homes due to economic unfortunate circumstances. I've been close to them numerous times. We have people who have drug problems who can't hold a job and are straying away from the norm of society and just want to be left alone. And we have a number of societal ills that aren't currently being addressed. The HSA, Human Service Agency of Ventura County, handles a great number of social service issues related to the issues of Oxnard. But that's a county issue. We should start taking more control of our own people and helping our own people, and perhaps that might reduce the load on our public safety officials that are extremely stressed out and trying to deal with social issues that are not properly trained on. Again, it's not as esoteric as our current mayor is, but I think it's one simple approach to start. It's something small. A laboratory is designed for a small experiment, and you can test the environment and see what works. Something as drastic as changing the format of the city and city charter and city organization is too extreme for me at this point in time.
And I'll say that something drastic will be my wife telling me that if I don't get home right now to my kids and eat dinner, I'm gonna be in a lot of trouble.
Julie, am I invited?
I think she's left.
We have one more question that
One more
you
question,
brought
yes.
up that's
Yes.
actually a very good question that kind of relates to my career as well, but why don't you go ahead?
Oh, yes, I gotta stand.
In light of the policing incidents that we have had, do you support body cams on police officers, understanding that there will be additional financial impact, but also we had some lawsuits that they could prevent lawsuits and they could exonerate police officers. Do you support that?
I don't think that body cameras, I think that body cameras can be helpful. I know that a lot of police officers have reservations about body cameras. I know that the chief of police right now is looking into that issue. And the chief of police has said to me, and I've heard others say, that initially it's very difficult for officers, it'd be like body cameras on teachers. I'm a teacher, so I would look at it, I've thought about it in that context. Okay, now we're getting down to body cameras with teachers in the class. I mean, it's getting, it's ridiculous. And so I think that anytime there's a tragedy in the community, like we've had here in the city of Oxnard, where at least, one person was innocent and he lost his life, that there's a pendulum that swings. And that pendulum then gets people to take a look at harsher, more restrictive, more draconian measures to try to somehow bring that, what they believe is the pendulum, back to the middle. And I would say that I'm open to all ideas. I think that the chief of police is looking into this issue of body cameras. I do think that it's apparently worked out in some cities, and they find that the body cameras are helpful, and that they, in more cases than others, they exonerate the officers. So I don't necessarily have a problem with it. I just think, though, that we need to, as a city, as a society, as a city, we need to do a better job. I need to do a better job at communicating with people, and that's all people in the community.
Mr. Stein?
I have to stand, I'm sorry.
Any thoughts? No.
I have a couple of thoughts on this issue. Technology is changing. How many people remember the comics back in the 1960s? I see a few people with gray hairs here, and Dick Tracy and his camera phone.
Yeah.
That's where we are now. We are there now. This is it. Rolex has a camera phone right now. Some other company has a camera phone right now.
We're working on glasses with
And I
cameras.
watch a program where we have people who go to undercover restaurants and videotape what's going on. So the concept, who's going to benefit by this? I think we see many situations where public safety officials could benefit by having more visual aids to help them in situations that they're in. Not necessarily protect them from lawsuits, because anybody can be sued for anything, but if we have technology that can help prevent crimes from happening or help protect anybody from losing a life or suffering harm, experiment. Don't go whole hogging on something, but try a small section, see if it works. Test the technology. And that's important. I would not be against it. But if I was to do it, I'd do it on a small scale first to see how it works out, work out the bugs. And if it's successful, expand it. If it's not successful, say, thank you very much, we tried.